With the release of Apple M4, we're now on the third generation of 15-inch MacBook Airs. The M2 was the first 15-inch Air to come out, and it's still an extremely solid performer in 2025, aside from a few minor issues, which I will go over in a minute. The M2 Air is obviously powered by Apple's M2 chip, which was released in 2022. It has twice the name, but unfortunately not twice the performance of Apple M1, which was released 2 years before that. Apple's M-series chips are SoCs, meaning the CPU and GPU are built into the same chip, and they share the computer's memory between them. M2 has 8 CPU cores, with 4 for performance and another 4 for efficiency, which is especially good for saving power and keeping heat down. The GPU inside has 10 cores, which is a decent improvement on the 7 or 8 GPU cores M1 came with. M2 Airs can be bought with 8, 16 or 24 GB of low-power DDR5 memory running at 6400 MHz speeds. As I said, it's unified memory, meaning those gigabytes can be used by the system or for graphics processing, depending on what's needed. Storage starts at 256 GB on this model, with options going all the way up to 2 TB at an obviously much higher price. I've got the base model 8 and 256 GB M2 Air, which unfortunately has a bit of a problem that not a lot of people know about. The 256 GB Airs have slower storage speeds than the 512 GB or above ones because they only have one NAND chip on board. That's presumably a cost-cutting measure from Apple and means SSD writing is especially slow compared to the M2 Airs with higher storage capacities and even the M1 MacBook Air. As a regular photo and video editor, it's an issue that's going to be especially noticeable when moving big files around and using them to create projects with. My M1 MacBook Air from 2020 has read and write speeds close to 100% faster than this base M2 does, just because it has twice the NAND chips on board for quicker access. It's a real shame that such a storage downgrade has occurred here, as it impacts this laptop's ability to compete with the other big MacBooks, the 16-inch MacBook Pros. I will say, however, M2 Air storage isn't slow. It's just slower than the light speed we've come to expect lately. You probably won't notice the difference unless you regularly work with big files, since boot times are the same across the different models. macOS is generally a fast operating system too, since it's so light, so it won't feel any slower. The 15-inch M2 MacBook Air borrows the newer body design that came to MacBook Airs from 2022, but is obviously a couple of inches bigger. There's a 15.3-inch screen on board with a resolution of 2880 by 1864. That's essentially the same size and resolution as the 15-inch MacBook Pros from 2012 to 2019 used. There is a notch on the top though to hold the camera and sensor array. I won't lie, I don't like the notch in the slightest. It's jarring to look at, and it makes full screen content appear misshapen to fit the screen. It's hard to describe, but the fact that the M2 Air doesn't have an OLED screen makes the black strips on each side incredibly ugly, since they aren't pure black and just don't blend in with the notch. In my eyes, the notch is an issue, but the display itself is fantastic. It's clearly bigger, brighter, and higher quality than the M1 MacBook Airs, and it doesn't appear far off the 16-inch MacBook Pros in quality. It's a 60Hz panel, whereas the MacBook Pro does have 120Hz capabilities, but I don't think refresh rate is quite as important as people make it out to be. Unless you're an esports gamer, you'll probably just get along fine with a 60Hz MacBook Air display. Alongside the great display, the speakers are truly excellent. It blows my mind just how loud, responsive at all ends, and mainly clear the under-keyboard speakers are, considering the size of this thing. There are 6 drivers inside to give the laptop a really strange surround sound feeling when you're in front of it. Apple obviously put a lot of work into making the audio sound the best they could, despite not having grills beside the keyboard for them like on other MacBook designs. It's nothing like any Windows laptop is quite capable of yet. The keyboard itself on this laptop is pretty perfect too. It's a scissor switch layout with full-size function keys, which is nice to see, honestly. There's also a Touch ID fingerprint sensor on the power button, which I've found super useful since Apple first introduced them in 2016. I think that since the failure of the 2015 to 17 12-inch MacBook models, Apple have been quite careful not to pull off any wacky laptop designs. They haven't strayed far from the scissor switch keyboard layout, and they haven't gone super thin again. The design of this MacBook is sensible at the very least, and I personally like it. The M2 Air does only really come in different shades of grey though, which is a bummer if you're expecting to return to rose gold or that new sky blue colour which you can only get on M4 MacBooks at the moment. The M2 15-inch Air comes with the huge Force Touch trackpad we've all come to expect from MacBooks these days. Force Touch trackpads don't move up and down and so are less prone to breaking over time. They also let you press firmly for another way of clicking, a bit like peek and pop on the XS and earlier iPhones. So going back to performance, it goes without saying that the M2 chip is a great performer for a laptop of this size. It's no more than 20% better than the M1 chip across the board, so don't expect leaps and bounds above that. But considering it doesn't even have a fan inside and the chassis is incredibly thin, it does very well. Photo and video editing works a treat on this computer. I came across absolutely no slowdowns until I started trying to edit in 4K using another display plugged in. Even then, the body wasn't overheating or anything, it just took a bit more time to finish whatever job I gave it. It's still impressive to see such solid performance from a MacBook Air, but it's worth noting that the M4 chip has taken us quite a bit further in terms of performance over the last few months since its release. It's got 10 cores versus 8 in this Mac's M2, and a decently faster clock speed. So at this point, a lot of early adopters might be selling their M1 and M2 machines on eBay for quite a discount since M4 Macs are out right now. While it's nice to think about getting that extra performance by buying the newest thing, I always recommend buying used because you'll easily get around 2/3 of the performance while paying only 1/3 of the price if you get something slightly older like an M1 MacBook Air. Speaking of the M1 MacBook Air, I still use one every day to edit my videos, so it was interesting to compare it to this 15-inch M2. It's very hard to tell if there's a performance difference between the two. If you really want the bigger screen, I'd wholly recommend going for the 15-inch as it's not too much more expensive right now. You also get one more free USB-C port since you can charge the M2 through MagSafe. The M2 Air has a 1080p webcam built into the notch too, which is a nice upgrade, and the speakers are on another level, like I said. If you have an M1 MacBook Air already, I wouldn't recommend the upgrade as there's just not a significant enough performance jump. But if you haven't bought an Apple Silicon MacBook yet, and you were thinking of getting a more expensive MacBook Pro, this MacBook Air can give you a lot of the things one of those would. Just remember, not the fastest storage, no 120Hz screen, and fewer ports. The M2 MacBook Air can also only connect to one external monitor at a time, so if that's an issue, perhaps you should look towards the M4 models or a MacBook Pro. I absolutely love the 15-inch MacBook Air, but I can't justify keeping it when I have an M1 machine already. I got this one for just £554 UK though, so hopefully I can resell it for a little more and break profits. If you want to get a look at how I resell my Macs, there are exclusive videos coming to my Patreon where I'm going to show you guys what I've bought and sold and why. I find it a lot of fun to be honest, and it's all unscripted, so it's a bit of a different look into what's on your screen. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe for more of course, and if you're into Macs, old or new, feel free to join the What's on Your Screen Discord server. We're active daily and discuss pretty much all in the world of technology.